Notre Dame might have the RB1 and the RB2. Jadarian Price, extremely explosive player, much like Love. A very realistic landing spot for Price. But I'm going to say 49 overall to Minnesota. Minnesota is screaming for a young, talented back like this. I think this would be an opportunity where you have to get talent at the running back position for them to potentially get something out of J.J. McCarthy.
Specifically like this from a scheme fit, Kevin O'Connell's the heavy outside zone. He needs juice at the running back position to really win that, and Jadarian Price has juice for days, so I think this is a really good fit.
That's him. That's the OG.
Dream fantasy football landing spots for the 2026 rookie class. Theo Gremminger and Brett Whitefield, 2026 NFL Draft Podcast, right here on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network and Fantasy Points YouTube. Brett, this is always one of the most fun podcasts that I do every single year. Really excited to be doing it with you this year. But when you talk about NFL draft classes, it doesn't always land how we want it in terms of fantasy football. Sometimes we end up with a wide receiver who projects as a big-time target earner, and sometimes that player lands in bad quarterback situations or maybe a ton of target competition. It's even harder for running backs, where there's sometimes no rhyme or reason to NFL teams where some of our favorite running backs can end up being in crowded backfield situations. We're throwing that completely out the window. We're saying, what are the best possible scenarios for this 2026 draft class? We're taking a look at all of the skill position players of note. We'll try to cover as many as we possibly can in about an hour here, Brett, but how stoked are you for this one?
Super stoked. I love talking about this stuff. It's like the blend of fantasy meets X's and O's. We're going to kind of put it all on the table and see where we're at.
It's like fantasy football fan fiction for some of you guys out there, but I think some of these, we're putting a little asterisk on this one, where it's dream landing spots that can actually happen. We're referencing actual spots in the NFL draft. We're not, obviously, we're not going to say, Jeremiyah Love, if he ends up on some team picking, in the bottom of the first round and how great it would be. We're not doing that. We're saying realistic landing spots that would be ideal for fantasy football. And Brett, let's just get this one going. Fernando Mendoza, who we're projecting to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. I'm actually going with the probable landing spot as a dream landing spot. The Las Vegas Raiders at 1 overall for Fernando Mendoza, dream landing spot. You've got a locked-in top target with immense talent in Brock Bowers at the tight end position. You've got a very talented running back that showed he can catch passes at the NFL level in Ashton Genty, also with great draft capital. Both of those guys completely locked in. Then you've got the Clint Kubiak system, which has been very, very fantasy friendly. And when you look at the offensive line struggles and issues in Vegas, you've got all this cap space to work with, and I fully expect Vegas to use that sort of capital to get some free agent offensive linemen. And Brett, when you talk about a fantasy football perspective, especially for you dynasty managers out there, when you're the number one overall pick, you have an incredibly long leash, the ability to fail. Teams are a little more patient with you. And if something happens in Vegas that's not good, another team would most likely take a chance on Mendoza and he could bounce back on the market. So there's a million outs for you as a number one overall pick, and we get to play with a very fantasy-friendly coordinator / head coach in Clint Kubiak.
Yeah, I can't think about Mendoza in another uniform at this point than Raiders, so I don't know, there might be a better fit out there. I don't know, maybe there's probably not. So they have some work to do, so I'm not going to act like Vegas doesn't have work to do. They got to improve the offensive line. They need another pass catcher that's worth their salt. But I do think this is a great landing spot. I'm really excited to see Mendoza in that Kubiak system.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, I think the two realistic landing spots for him could be Arizona, could be the New York Jets. Certainly, I think the Browns would love to get in the mix there. But when you factor in Kubiak and Brock Bowers, I still would lean towards Vegas with that one. Arizona would be a fun one because you have two wide receivers there. You obviously have Trey McBride there. They're going to have to improve their offensive line, but we absolutely love Vegas for Fernando Mendoza. Jeremiyah Love, this is a really fun one. We fully expect him to go inside of the top 10, an elite talent, a player that we're both very excited about. Brett, where would be an ideal scenario for you to see Jeremiyah Love end up in?
I want to see him in New Orleans at number 8 overall, getting that similar draft capital to Bijan Robinson from a few years back. But ultimately, like, New Orleans already has some dudes on the O-line. I think Kelvin Banks was a revelation at left tackle for them as a rookie. They've got some other really nice pieces. Cesar Ruiz is still a really good player. And then to mix, you've got Kellen Moore as a play caller. I thought really proved last year that he can make a lot work with a little. He had a rookie quarterback in Tyler Shuck. Chris Olave, really the only established wide receiver there after the Shaheed trade, and it still worked really, really well. So I would love to see him as kind of this young upcoming offense with Olave and Shuck and Jawan Johnson. I think it'd just be a really good fit for what Kellen Moore is going to do. We saw the historic level season Saquon Barkley had with Moore in Philly. So I get pretty excited from thinking about it from that. From fantasy, it's like the volume would absolutely crush. Plus, I think the efficiency would be much better than, say, what we saw from Ashton Genty a year ago in a bad situation in Las Vegas.
Yeah, the New Orleans is such a fantastic landing spot, and I could have done that one, Brett, but I'm going to go one pick earlier. I'm going to go with the Washington Commanders because Jeremiyah Love, for me, the home run hitting ability for him to rip off huge plays, that might be maximized getting a chance to play next to Jaden Daniels with Daniels' ability as a runner. Obviously, Tyler Shuck, he's got some ability as a runner, but Daniels, I think, is a truly elite type runner, a player capable of leading all quarterbacks in rushing yards next year. And Jeremiyah Love, the stat that I love throwing out, it seems very simplistic, but 3 touchdowns over 90 yards at Notre Dame, that's simply insane. And then when you look at Washington, they are screaming for a skill position player to become the offensive focal point and take a little bit of pressure off of Daniels to have to play hero ball every single week. The older wide receiver core, Zach Ertz probably retiring. They got a good amount out of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt last year as a 7th-round pick, but Jeremiyah Love going there at 7 overall, you can just see it now. The entire DMV would be a bunch of Love jerseys. Also, the Washington Commanders, not to get too over the heads here, but they have a new stadium that they're going to be moving into in the near future. They need a franchise-type talent that would sell a lot of tickets there. When you had Jaden Daniels next to Jeremiyah Love, franchise-wise, it makes sense. And fantasy football, it would be an absolute dream. I would also say that Jeremiyah Love would be drafted earlier next year in all formats if he was a Washington Commander over the Saints, just because of the threat of the rushing quarterback. Your thoughts on Washington versus New Orleans?
Yeah, it's not a bad fit at all. The thing I really love about it, you mentioned Jaden Daniels' rushing ability, and to put that in perspective for people, what that does, you're tag and read option on all these runs, which gives the running back basically a free +1 in the box. So from a box count standpoint, you have to commit a defender to Jaden Daniels and the threat of him keeping the ball. Ergo, you get a ton of light box looks for your running back. And when Jeremiyah Love is the back behind those, light box looks, it looks pretty spectacular. I mean, just think like Derrick Henry the last couple of years in Baltimore, where it seemed like he was on the downturn of his career. Well, his yards per carry actually went way up because Lamar Jackson's giving him that pseudo +1 on every single play. So it'd be a similar effect there. And it maximizes offensive line play as well, where Washington doesn't have a ton of dudes on the O-line. They've got some average players and some below average players, and you'd really maximize kind of the situation at hand already.
Yeah, it would be either landing spot would be fantastic. Now, we both came up with the exact same landing spot for Carnell Tate, the wide receiver out of Ohio State, who's currently the wide receiver 1 in this draft class for both of us. And stay tuned. We're also going to be recording a top 5 players at each and every position episode of the 2026 NFL Draft Podcast. That's going to be a fun one to record. We're doing that a little later this week. But Carnell Tate, our wide receiver 1, we both came up with the exact same landing spot. Why don't you break it down for the people, Brett?
Yeah, it's super simple. Number 4 to Tennessee. I think when you look at it from it's realistic because in this draft, there's some blue chip talent players, but they're of positions that aren't super valuable. They don't get drafted high. So that's going to push a guy like Carnell Tate up the board, where he might not necessarily be a blue chip talent, but he could definitely go in the top 5 because he's awesome. And a team like Tennessee needs a wide receiver one. I really like the fit, though, mostly because I don't think Cam Ward can overthrow Carnell Tate. And you go watch the Ohio State tape with Carnell, like he is so physically gifted downfield, the ball tracking, the separation ability, the ball skills. It's all incredible. And Cam Ward needs a guy that can really maximize that arm talent because he's got a ton of arm talent. Obviously, they need some players to help with the on-schedule stuff as well, but it'd be so awesome to see Carnell Tate, his scramble drill ability with Cam Ward, and they really just need a true number one wide receiver, a guy with that kind of pedigree and talent to help Cam Ward and help his development. I can't ask for a better guy than Carnell Tate to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the fact that you go to Tennessee, I think would be very interesting because we talk about the ability to become the focal point of the entire offense. The A.J. Green pathway would be there for him. Cam Ward desperately needs a wide receiver one in this offense. I think Tennessee's added some interesting players that could really develop. Chim Dike, Gunnar Helm, they got as an undrafted free agent, or he was a day three pick. Elik Iamaner, they got him on day 3 last year. Tyjae Spears can catch the ball in the backfield, but they really need a true alpha on the outside with Carnell Tate. And I think from a dynasty lens, when you talk about players drafted inside of the top 5 overall, the hit rate is exceptional. You're talking about guys like Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors. I mean, you're into like the true elite territory when you're talking about guys drafted in the top 5 at the wide receiver position. So we would love to see that for a guy we both really like Carnell Tate. Right now, you can get access to 10% off of any fantasy points package. Use the code DRAFT26 and get 10% off of all of our packages at fantasypoints.com. Brett, let's talk about Jordyn Tyson, who is not as clean a prospect as Carnell Tate, but he's still a really intriguing one. Has a lot of traits that scream wide receiver one at the next level. We've talked about the physicals with him, where there's certain NFL teams are going to take a strong look at some of these past injuries, but none of them were repeat injuries. Jordyn Tyson, I think, will be fine, and I think he's a player that we're looking at is going to get drafted somewhere in the upper half of the first round. My dream landing spot for him would be we see Carnell Tate go off the board at 4 overall to Tennessee, and Cleveland goes and gets their wide receiver at 6 overall. And some people are going to say, hey, Theo, let's keep Jordyn Tyson in a better offensive system. But when I look at Cleveland, the success they had last year, the evaluation they had on Quinshon Judkins, the evaluation they had on Harold Fannin Jr., and frankly, the equity they got out of Shedeur Sanders, being able to get him so late in the NFL draft, really did well with their draft class last year. And that's not to mention what they were able to do on the defensive side of the ball with multiple players hitting. I think that if Tyson ends up in Cleveland, you would get him in a top 10 draft capital, which would just speak volumes for how the Browns would view him. He would have an instant path to becoming the wide receiver one on that offense, would be a really good complement to Harold Fannin, and I think the leading target earner as a rookie, with Fannin probably being the number 2. Both of those guys I think would be north of 100 targets, but I think Tyson projects as maybe the top target there. And Jerry Jeudy's just not it when it comes to being a number 1 target at the NFL level. And I am very bullish on Todd Monken. I think Todd Monken is very underrated. I think the hire is underrated. I think Monken is a coach that's going to maximize the offensive skill position talent on his roster, and I think he would certainly do so with Jordyn Tyson. So Jordyn Tyson, for me, I get the top 10 draft capital and a spot where he has a pathway to being the number 1 target on the offense. I'm going Cleveland Browns 6 overall.
Love it. I'm a little different than you. I don't necessarily mind that fit. I do think, and maybe I'm galaxy braining this because I'm thinking about it from an X's and O's and evaluation standpoint, but my read on Tyson early is he's going to have this developmental runway that allows him to kind of ascend to that wide receiver one role over time. I don't think it's something he's capable of doing right now, at least not in a functional offense. And so I look at a team like the New York Jets at 16, who have an established wide receiver one in Garrett Wilson, who's kind of that route running, separation, on schedule type player already there, which allows Tyson to lean into his strengths right now as a player, which is his physicality. He's got he's really gifted physically. He's a great athlete, but he's got really good body control, run after catch ability, and he can kind of be more of the off script type player that you design touches for, you manufacture yards with, some of those easy button throws. I look at the potential QB situation in New York as well and think, well, they're going to need a guy because they're not going to be able to, they're not going to get a Fernando Mendoza, right? They're looking at probably a Malik Willis or a Kyler Murray type retread, a Tua type retread. Well, they're going to need a guy that they can get those easy button throws from. And it's not that you can't with Garrett Wilson. It's just he's more of your traditional, wide receiver one type player. So I like the developmental runway a spot like the New York Jets would give him, where he's got a player there that can take pressure off of him, and he can really just kind of lean into his strengths as he develops as a player. And then I'm looking at year 2, year 3 of him really ascending into a dominant role.
Yeah, I mean, you get the advantageous coverages with Garrett Wilson, who's been a mega target earner, a chance for maybe more big play ability out of Tyson. So I think that one's fine. Either way you cut it, we're both saying teams picking inside of the top 16 right there. Let's talk about Kenyon Sadiq, our tight end 1 overall in the class, a mega athlete out of Oregon. Sadiq's interesting. We've done multiple mock drafts at this point. We just did one with Alex Dunlap of Roster Watch. Make sure you check that one out over on Fantasy Points YouTube or right here on the podcast feed. And Sadiq fell a little bit. This is the first time we've seen Sadiq go inside of the mid-20s. After a couple of times we drafted and we had him going inside of the top 15. I think that just kind of speaks volumes to how wide open the first round is right now. But we are saying that Sadiq's going to be a quote-unquote lock to be selected inside of round 1. Been 3 mock drafts in, Sadiq in the first round every single time. Younger player, extremely explosive, in that 6'3", 245 range. It's a layup for me where I want to see him end up. I want to see a passing of the torch, and I want to see the Kansas City Chiefs, who picked 9 overall, saying we had so much success with Travis Kelce. Let's take Kenyon Sadiq, have a year of the two of them playing together, and then Travis Kelce, whenever he wants to, fade into the sunset and become a NFL commentator. Somewhere is going to hire Travis Kelce easily. Then Kenyon Sadiq takes over as Patrick Mahomes' tight end. This one doesn't need much explanation. It's paint by numbers here. We've seen it happen. Andy Reid gets another premium tight end prospect and runs with it. Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I went with the other side of the spectrum just to give the listeners kind of like a wide range here. I do think Sadiq probably goes somewhere between that pick and where I'm going to say. I have wrote down 2 teams, Philadelphia Eagles at 23, 49ers at 27. I don't think the NFL is going to view Sadiq as the lock top 10 guy like a Colson Loveland or a Ty Warren was from last year, but I do think he's a lock to go in the first round. So I think this range we're talking about, Theo, is spot on. I just don't have a good feel right now where he's going to land in that range. So these 2 teams specifically, Dallas Goedert's getting a little, long in the tooth. He's dealt with injuries the last couple of years, and he's not an overly dynamic player in the pass game. And you're talking about a team that's going to probably be moving on from A.J. Brown, via trade, and then you're going to look to immediately have to fulfill that target, those targets in the offense. And why not go with a tight end that can play in the slot, can play out wide, and still be a big factor in the run game, play more 12 personnel rather than standard 11 personnel, while Goddard's still there, and he can kind of develop into a dominant pass catcher. I love that fit. And then the San Francisco one is kind of low-hanging fruit for the same reasons the Kansas City one are, where George Kittle had a late season ACL. Was ACL right or Achilles?
It was Achilles, I believe.
It was Achilles, sorry. Late season Achilles tear, very likely to miss most of, if not all, of next season. He's also already into his 30s. This could be a death sentence for Kittle, unfortunately. I'm not saying he doesn't ever play again, but he's not going to be the same guy. So why not go with a very similarly built Sadiq, who's also a monster in the run game, great for that Shanahan run scheme. I think that'd be a great fit as a kind of a pass the torch moment, a forced pass the torch moment rather than a voluntary one in Kansas City.
I love both of your landing spots. I think all 3 of these landing spots would be really, really fun. And Philly, I think that landing spot, once the A.J. Brown trade happens, which we're both thinking that's going to happen, and a number of Philly beat reporters are also thinking that's going to happen. It just seems like the writing's on the wall. And then you factor in Goddard. I love that landing spot. I think Sadiq would do well in any of these 3 situations. let's talk about Makai Lemon, a wide receiver that there's a hive right now in fantasy football among dynasty managers for Makai Lemon. A lot of people extremely high on his fantasy football potential. Brett Whitefield, we're breaking him down all offseason long until he completely gets there. Makai Lemon projects as a player who can be a big-time target earner at the NFL level, and I would love to see him end up at 11 overall in Miami. And people are going to say, Theo, let's get him to a really good quarterback, but we don't know who the quarterback's going to be in Miami. But we do know that the target competition really whittles down to Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane out of the backfield. So you've got Jalen Waddle, who's got contract insulation. I believe Jalen Waddle is going to be on year 3 of a 3-year deal, though, Brett. So I think Waddle is a player that eventually could move on, and Miami could sort of pass the torch from a wide receiver 1 standpoint. You could see Makai Lemon operating as the number 2 target in Miami as a rookie, and then taking over as the number 1 target heading into the 2027 season, and a chance that the quarterback position gets much, much better in Miami. So for me, I love seeing him get top 15 draft capital, landing in a situation where he can operate as the number 2 as a rookie, and then a clear pathway to being a player that's going to be 130, 140 target or more player in year 2 of his career. I think this will be an upward trajectory as a dynasty and fantasy football asset. I love your landing spots too, though, Brett. Why don't you break those down?
Yeah, one comment on the Miami thing. For me, I mean, obviously you'd love for a receiver to get that kind of draft capital. That would be awesome. There's a little redundancy with Lemon and Waddle from the standpoint of they just both play the slot. Achane gets a ton of slot reps as well. And then if Tyreek is still in the fold somehow, some way, he also plays a ton in the slot. So it's like, I don't really know what you do. I mean, there's something to be said about just having 3 good football players on the field, I guess. But it's a little bit murkier waters for me to project that out. So, my landing spots, though, I'll go 26 to Buffalo.
That's the one.
Let's just get Josh.
That's the one.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome, and I know they like Khalil Shakir. He's a fine player, but he's not holding me back from drafting my quarterback, a true wide receiver 1. Shakir is not that. We know by now Shakir is a high efficiency gadget type player who can win on some deep crossers, but nothing really more than that. Makai Lemon's a way more dynamic run after catch. He's also he's kind of like Mac Hollins in a smaller body, the way he plays, just angry, physical player. I think he'd be perfect for Josh, just a guy you can constantly rely on to do the small things. He's also, really competent in the run game as well as a blocker, and I know Buffalo values that type of stuff. The other one I had here was 27 to the San Francisco, for same reason as Kenyon Sadiq. They just need an upgrade at pass catcher, right? Ricky Pearsall can't stay healthy. Jawan Jennings is a good player, not a great player, and they're going to move on from Brandon Ayuk. So upgrade there. And then the last one would be 29 to the Rams. You could also say 13 to the Rams if we're getting crazy here, right? Either way, the Rams is a great fit. There's so much overlap with him and Puka, but it doesn't really matter because the way Sean McVay calls plays, you can move those guys around. The way they use motion is fantastic. Then you get a year of Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, and Makai Lemon to go for it. And then after that, Devontae takes off and you have Makai and Puka dominating touches there. And one thing I actually, from a fantasy lens, people will say, well, how can that be a good landing spot if he's got Puka Nacua on the same roster? LA doesn't really work that way. They are a 2-headed monster. They have been since last year with Kupp and Adams, Kupp and Nacua, this year with Adams and Nacua, where these two guys, they take up 70 to 80% of the targets game in and game out. Both Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams ranked inside the top 10 in targets per route run this year, in target share, which is insane. So I think it could absolutely work for fantasy. You could get 2 wide receiver 1s there with Lemon and Nacua.
Yeah, and we've seen this, and we talked about this with Scott Barrett a lot from a fantasy football lens on the School of Scott podcast that Scott and I record every weekend season. And no team has had a more consolidated target tree at the top.
That's the word I was looking for.
Cooper Kupp and Puka did it for multiple seasons. And now we had it this past year with Devontae Adams and Kupp. I mean, There's literally no other team. And then you have the benefit that Sean McVay is the play caller. So there's been some LA beat reporters sort of insinuating that if LA doesn't love somebody else at 13, Makai Lemon makes sense for them there. And Brett, how do you go and beat the Seattle Seahawks? Put Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, Makai Lemon out there and bombs away. Let's go.
Can't cover
all of them. You gotta block a little bit against that Seattle defense, but if you can do it, that's looking pretty good. There's one other wide receiver that I think the two of us are very, very high on relative to some other people out there in the NFL and fantasy space, and that's KC Concepcion of Texas A&M. I thought I was super high on KC. Brett's even higher than I am on him. So let's talk about KC Concepcion. You talked about 13 overall for Makai Lemon. I'm going to say KC Concepcion in my dream scenario here, where I've got Jeremiyah Love at 7, I've got Kenyon Sadiq at 9, I've got Carnell Tate at 4, I've got Jordyn Tyson at 6, I've got Makai Lemon at 11. Why not keep the fantasy football party going? And let's have KC Concepcion get this demon to Sean McVay. I'm more athletic than Makai Lemon. Way twitchier there.
Yeah, by a lot.
So you're talking about your same argument where you could line all three of them up with Devontae Adams, and then KC would operate as the number 2 target when Devontae Adams eventually moves away from LA. Devontae's got to retire at some point. I know the guy's one of these rule breakers, but eventually you get to the point where it's Puka Nacua, KC Concepcion, and then you get the creativity of Sean McVay. Some of those design runs for KC Concepcion could be dynamic in this offense. We saw it this past year with Puka Nacua. You'd also have that with KC Concepcion, maybe even a little bit more. So I have KC Concepcion there. And then a low-end landing spot was, for me, it's 26 overall to Buffalo. If the wide receivers are drafted later than I would like them to be, then obviously KC Concepcion landing as Josh Allen's number 1 target. That would be very, very exciting. How about for you with KC Concepcion?
One more thing on the LA fit. The contrast between him and Puka I like a lot better than Lemon and Puka. And then also, if he was there, we presumably wouldn't have to see Jordan Whittington return punts anymore. Which
that's a great
that would be awesome, because that's painful to the eyes to watch. Anyways, my fits. I have 8 to New Orleans. I know I already listed Jeremiyah Love, but I just feel like with Kellen Moore right now, if they just add one more elite playmaking talent, whether that's Love or a guy like KC Concepcion, I know people are like, 8? That's high. Well, yeah, he's a top 10 player for me in this draft. So might be high to you, not high to me. That's exactly where I see him going, or where I think he should go, rather. But yeah, just getting another playmaker in that offense. They lost Rashid Shaheed, and you lost a little bit of the explosiveness of the pass game. I want to get that back with KC Concepcion. You also can do all the gadget type stuff. He's a great route runner. Really, there isn't any receiver trait he doesn't do at a high level. I think he's a better prospect than Chris Olave even was, and Olave, is going to be a mainstay there for years to come, and it'd be a really nice 1-2 punch in an offense with a really good play caller who knows how to scheme it up for 2 different guys. We saw A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both have success at the same time under Kellen Moore, and without a dominant run game too. I guess the ceiling's even higher for that, right? So, I go New Orleans at 8. Another spot I'll throw at you is just the Miami one. Similar reasons why you wanted Makai Lemon there. I want KC Concepcion there. It's kind of funny we flipped our landing spots, right? I just think the explosiveness, the inside-out versatility plays better with Waddle than say Makai Lemon. But
I love your idea of KC Concepcion in New Orleans, keeping him indoors, playing every single home game indoors would just be absolutely electric to see him in the Superdome. All right, Brett, we're talking Denzel Boston, another wide receiver we're pretty high on in this draft class. Boston, a bigger-bodied wide receiver. We're both projecting him to go inside of round 1. For me, there's a bunch of landing spots that I like, and certainly those end of the first round ones are fun, but I like the idea of him at 21 overall to Pittsburgh. Mike McCarthy taking over as head coach. Boston would have a clear pathway to becoming the number 1 target in that offense and becoming the wide receiver 1 with DK Metcalf operating as the wide receiver 2. I don't think Metcalf is your classic alpha wide receiver 1 that you want to see heading into like a getting older scenario for DK Metcalf. I think that there needs to be a passing of the torch. They need to add wide receiver talent in Pittsburgh, and I would get him at 21 overall, which would be strong draft capital. I think Boston would be fast-tracked as a Pittsburgh Steeler. Where would you like to see him end up?
I mean, that's my ideal landing spot. You stole it, so I wrote down some others. Another note I'll throw on the Pittsburgh fire though, is that my kind of working comp for Boston right now is CeeDee Lamb. And Mike McCarthy obviously had a lot of success with CeeDee Lamb in Dallas. So I think that kind of gets me a little tingly thinking about.
The CeeDee, don't bury the lead here. Your working comp is CeeDee Lamb
from a play style.
Okay.
I don't do ceiling floor. I do play style.
Fine. But the people are not going to hear the context. You just said CeeDee Lamb is your working comp for Denzel Boston. The people should listen to that one when Brett is saying it.
Yeah. I'm a huge Boston fan. I do really like him. So
you've mentioned Puka Nacua with him as well.
Yeah. Some of the run after catch stuff of Puka as well. But Lamb's got that trait as well. So I'll go, since you took my number one spot, I'll go with the next best spot, and that's 31 in New England. If you watch the Super Bowl, we're recording this a day after the Super Bowl. If you watched it, guys, New England has some issues on offense still. One of them is they have no actual wide receivers, like literally none. Kayshon Boutte, nice player, not a wide receiver one. Probably not even a guy I want as my wide receiver two, if I'm being honest. Yeah. Stephon Diggs is washed. Let's go ahead and grab us our wide receiver one of the future that can grow with Drake May. I mean, if he landed in New England, Theo, his fantasy outlook would have to be massive, right?
Absolutely. I think he would immediately become a wide receiver one type there. And this is a franchise that really needs an injection of talent at the wide receiver position. They're probably going to need to add a younger tight end as well. That offensive line got completely exposed. This is a team that is very vulnerable despite making a Super Bowl. But getting Drake May, like we saw it last year, they spend the money in the offseason to go get Stephon Diggs, sort of a opportunistic signing for them to get a semblance of a wide receiver one. And Diggs had some big performances, but against that Seattle defense, no, it's not happening. Denzel Boston gives them a chance to have a player that could really develop with Drake May down the line, can win in the red zone for him, can win downfield, a big-bodied player, can win those 50-50 balls. He's a clear talent upgrade over every single wide receiver on their roster. So I would love that landing spot. Obviously, the Buffalo one is fun as well. We'll keep mentioning that. Let's pivot over to the quarterback position. And I'm not a huge Ty Simpson guy, but I think Ty Simpson of Alabama is going to benefit from being in this draft class where there's not a clear quarterback two, and I think there's going to be a number of NFL franchises that view Ty Simpson as that. Where would be a landing spot that I think Simpson could do the best at as an NFL pro? For me, it's the LA Rams at 29 overall. And I think that this would give him an opportunity to be on the Jordyn Love trajectory, meaning it would be another year or two out of Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford basically can start for as long as he still wants to be a pro, and Ty Simpson would get valuable opportunity to start preseason games, to get worked in whenever possible, and learn behind Matt Stafford. The biggest issue I have with Ty Simpson is the lack of collegiate starts. And I know we had a season of him playing well in the big boy leagues of the SEC. But Brett, when we look at a lot of the quarterbacks who have failed miserably at the NFL level in recent note, it's been guys who have a lack of college starts, and that's certainly Ty Simpson. So get him to Sean McVay, let him learn behind a Hall of Famer in Matt Stafford, and maybe year two potentially, but possibly year three, Ty Simpson just steps in as a seasoned backup quarterback. It seems like a lot of draft capital, but for this McVay offense to operate in the best possible light, you need a quarterback that knows how to run it. Ty Simpson as a third-year pro, I think that would be exciting. And from a dynasty lens, it would suck because you'd have to sit on it, but it would be an asset that would eventually pay off.
I can't argue with the logic here at all. I think the biggest issue with these types of guys is the one thing they need is playing time, yet it's the one thing you don't want to get them right away because the inexperience is there, right? LA is kind of best of both worlds in some regards because, like, we know Stafford basically doesn't participate in training camp anymore because he's got the back. Cool. Ty Simpson's your QB1 from July to September 1st. And then he gets all those valuable reps of training camp, running the first team offense into the preseason games. He can be your QB1. He's going to get a ton of valuable experience. And then if Stafford, God forbid anything happened, he can come in and get reps there as well. But at least he does get that full training camp as the guy into the preseason games. The spot I'll throw out, though, from like hey, we can go play this guy right now and it's not going to require a huge investment. That'd be 33 to the Jets. They obviously need a quarterback. They have Justin Fields under contract for another year. I think they have the rookie Quinn, right, from last year, who's
awful.
Maybe yeah, he may have earned a camp invite though to return as a chance to be a QB3 or a practice squad stash. So you kind of have two in the fold potentially. Add Ty Simpson, a much more talented player from a passing standpoint, as both those guys to compete. He probably wins that job rather quickly, maybe by even week 1 of the regular season. I don't know that that'd be a great situation for him though with the current state of the Jets. However, if you want to get the guy playing time, I mean, there's probably not an easier spot for him to get it than there.
Good luck to Aaron Glenn retaining your head coaching job if you're going with Ty Simpson in week 1. But yeah, Brett, from a get on the field standpoint, certainly it would be way, way easier than my Jordyn Love trajectory where I'm saying the guy needs to sit for 2 years. So Ty Simpson, we covered it there. Let's talk about a fun running back prospect. Oh, this running back class is getting beat up. You're not going to hear Brett and I beating it up quite as much. It's certainly not the 2025 class, but we already talked about Jeremiyah Love. Let's talk about Jonah Coleman out of Washington, who's a shorter back who's very thick and strong, like 5'8", 5'9", 225, 228, a back that's able to withstand a high volume of touches and is a capable receiver out of the backfield. For me, you talked about the New Orleans landing spot for Jeremiyah Love. In this scenario, I'm going to say Jonah Coleman. The Saints don't get an opportunity to select him because, of course, I had Washington taking Jeremiyah Love. So let's go Jonah Coleman, 42 overall to the New Orleans Saints, instantly becomes a player that can step into the Kellen Moore offense, be a high-volume touch guy out of the backfield. The team probably can move off of Alvin Kamara this offseason or rotate these two together for one more year. But Kamara is getting much older. There was some regression this past year. Just wasn't a great fit in the Kellen Moore offense. I think Jonah Coleman could end up being a very, very strong fantasy football asset in this offense. Lacks the home run hitting ability. We're not going to see that like we saw from Jeremiyah Love, but the ability to compile stats, to be a 20 touch per game player. I think he can be that at the NFL level. Jonah Coleman, 42 overall to the Saints.
I really like the fit. And I want to caution the listeners. You're going to look at his profile and see 5'9", 230 and think this is an early down grinder only type. This is an every down back for me. I think he profiles as an every down back. Whether he gets that workload right away or not, we won't know that for a while. But he does have the skill set to be an every down type of player. So don't be scared of that just because the weird build. I think he's actually really comparable to like a Zach Charbonnet to me, skill set wise.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I think that's fine. And you talk about Charbonnet, like we can appreciate like sort of the nuances of Charbonnet that maybe some don't, but I think his potential to be the combination of a touchdown scorer, just like Zach Charbonnet, who's been very effective finding the end zone, and a back that's heavier but can still catch passes out of the backfield, which Charbonnet can do. Yeah. I think that's a really strong one, and this is similar draft capital that we saw Zach Charbonnet have a few years back. So get Jonah Coleman that top 50 draft capital, and I think sort of wheels up.
Yeah, and Coleman won't have to share the backfield with Kenneth Walker if he goes to New Orleans. So that's gonna make him way more valuable. Just like Charbonnet would be way more valuable without Kenneth Walker in his life. So I don't even want to say mine. I like New Orleans enough that I don't even want to say mine. So
let's move on then. We're gonna pivot. I'm gonna jump around the show sheet here. Let's actually go with another running back. Let's go with Jadarian Price, who is also in the competition to be the second running back off the board. Interestingly enough, Jadarian Price, for anybody sort of catching up on the draft class, played at the same college as Jeremiyah Love. Notre Dame might have the RB1 and the RB2. Jadarian Price, extremely explosive player, much like Love. Price is going to fly at the NFL Combine, a chance to be a high-value touch guy, and we think he's going to be a better receiver at the next level than he had to at Notre Dame, where he had very minimal opportunities. But Jadarian Price, a very, very talented player, despite being the number 2 running back at Notre Dame. And interesting, if Jadarian Price, he's an early entrant to the NFL draft. If he would have gone back to Notre Dame, he would have been one of the top draft prospects at the running back position in the 2027 class, which is really saying a lot. That's a pretty loaded running back room shaping up for 2027. But I'll say for me, a very realistic landing spot for Price There's actually a couple teams, Brett, where I think he could get drafted earlier than this. But I'm going to say 49 overall to Minnesota. Minnesota is screaming for a young, talented back like this. I think this would be an opportunity where you have to get talent at the running back position for them to potentially get something out of J.J. McCarthy. You look at J.J. McCarthy when he was successful at Michigan, a strong running game right next to him, and explosive plays coming from the running game next to him. McCarthy also adds the mobility that I think would benefit Price being able to rip off some big, long, explosive plays in this run game. And with Minnesota, I've got some talent on the offensive line. I think Jadarian Price could be really fantasy friendly, even if he's leading a committee back, like being the 65% guy in a committee backfield. I think in Minnesota, he could thrive in this role. So I'm going to say 49 overall to the Minnesota Vikings for Jadarian Price.
We rolled on the same team again, Theo, Minnesota. I specifically like this from a scheme fit. Kevin O'Connell's the heavy outside zone. He needs juice at the running back position to really win that. I know they tried some different things this year with, I'm forgetting his name, the dude from San Francisco. Jordan Mason.
Yeah, Jordan Mason, yep.
Some more duo, inside zone, man gap stuff. But really, at its core, O'Connell wants to win the edge in the run game, and Jadarian Price has juice for days. So I think this is a really good fit schematically. Some Aaron Jones vibes a little bit too, young Aaron Jones vibes, minus the pass down, resume.
So let's talk about Indiana. Let's get back to the wide receiver position. Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper are going to be linked by a lot of people sort of doing what we're doing here, Brett, because they're both very, very talented players, very, very successful this past year for Indiana. Anybody watching Fernando Mendoza and the Indiana Hoosiers win the national title, throughout the process, we're like, wow, these wide receivers were really, really good. And I think that the draft capital is going to reflect that with both of these players. Could Surratt and Cooper sneak into round one? I think they could potentially, but more likely than not, I think both are selected inside of round two. And I'll just go rapid fire for both of these guys. I'm going to say Elijah Surratt. We saw him with Fernando Mendoza at Indiana. How about Elijah Surratt is drafted by the Vegas Raiders at 36 overall. They go Indiana with their first two picks. And when you look at it, you get a Clint Kubiak offense for Surratt. You get an opportunity for him to be the number 2 target in the passing game behind Brock Bowers and their wide receiver one. Really, a lot of what they lost from Jacoby Myers could be emulated by Surratt immediately, and potential for him to be even more in this offense. Elijah Surratt at 36. And for Omar Cooper, I'll give you 2 landing spots. If Tennessee chooses to go in another direction, maybe takes an edge rusher, maybe takes an offensive lineman, maybe goes Jeremiyah Love at 4 overall, then Omar Cooper is sitting there at 35 overall to the Tennessee Titans, would immediately slot in as a potential wide receiver one there. And then my other spot, similar to you're talking about Tyson at being the number 2, 44 overall to the New York Jets, Omar Cooper.
Yeah, I like those. Those are great fits. The Tennessee one, especially for Cooper, if they don't go with one at 4, I think it's a really good call. Gives Cam Ward some easy button throws. My fits, I like 53 to Pittsburgh for Elijah Surratt. They need talent at outside wide receivers specifically. DK Metcalf doesn't quite look like the same player he was, and they have guys like Calvin Austin, guys like Roman Wilson, but they're obviously better suited for the slot. I think Surratt can come in and play kind of the Z flanker role, also can play the X, can also play in the slot a little bit. So gives them a really versatile player that allows them to get their best 3 receivers on the field when they're in 11 personnel. Obviously targets to go around there as well. So Omar Cooper for me, 48 to Atlanta. The Darnell Mooney experience, was fun while it lasted. He's been injured quite a bit. He's even under contract beyond this year. Did they do an extension with him?
Mooney's still under contract. I think they could potentially get out of it, but he's locked in for next year.
Gotcha. Drake London, obviously a stud, but Cooper and London would really, really complement each other well. London being your big body possession type guy. Cooper can be a guy you scheme up plays for, but also a guy who just dominates the short part of the field and kind of complements London very well. Gives, Penix or Kirk Cousins 2 really good options to go along with Kyle Pitts there. So I'd be a big fan of that one.
Yeah, I love the idea of Omar Cooper in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I had wanted Atlanta to try to get in the mix for Luther Burden last year. I think elevating that number two wide receiver role is important for them long term, especially for Michael Penix, a quarterback they want to see develop and grow. And also, you've got the added caveat that Kyle Pitts is probably retained. I think they'll franchise tag him, but there's also a chance that Pitts is gone on the open market. So Cooper landing there, he could potentially be the number 2 target or number 3 if Bijan Robinson just continues sapping up the targets, but still an important part of that passing game. I love both your landing spots for those guys, and I think both those guys, writings on the wall, headed for round 2 if they don't sneak into round 1. Both very good players. Let's talk about my tight end 2 overall in this class, and I think this has been your tight end 2 as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, Brett.
Yeah.
But Eli Stowers of Vanderbilt, very, very athletic player, sub 240, a little smaller than Kenyon Sadiq, but one of these tight ends that can operate inside the slot, a true move tight end, big-time athlete, converted quarterback to the tight end position, very, very successful player at Vanderbilt this year in the SEC. I'm going to go shock here. I'm going to go, well, I guess not that shocking when I see your landing spot here, but where could Eli Stowers have an immediate fantasy impact? Where could he land? And like the dynasty marketplace just immediately steams him up, and the early best ball drafters immediately steam him up. I'm going to say 30 overall to Denver. You get an athletic, freaky tight end, capable of being a high-end target earner, sort of like a young Evan Engram ends up in Denver and just takes over from old dusty Evan Engram. And you get Bo Nix, another receiver who is a potentially really, really strong player in ability to win in multiple places on the field. You can really move him around that offense. And you look at guys like Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, Cortland Sutton, fits in really well in that mold. I think this would be a really fun, exciting landing spot for him.
I love it. I like 31 in New England as a shock pick, getting in that first round. New England was dreadful out of 12 personnel last year. I think Drake May only had 300 yards passing out of 12 and 13 personnel all season. If you look at league trends, that's not a winning formula. That's falling behind the trends, right? This was the advent of 12 and 13 personnel all year. And there's never been a better year to draft a guy like Eli Stowers because of that, where he is basically built like a big slot receiver, i.e., a more athletic version of Arondé Gatson, who had a very successful rookie season in LA. I think Stowers would give them the firepower they need to really elevate those 12 and 13 personnel looks, which New England likes to be in. They just aren't very good at it, so they kind of shy away from it. I think this would totally revolutionize their offense. We also know for a fact Josh McDaniels is historically really good out of 12 personnel, right? The years with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez stick out. Eli Stowers is a Hernandez type player. So I really feel like that would be an awesome spot for him. He could honestly develop into their number 1 pass catcher. And, they have good inline tight ends there right now in Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. Stowers would add that athletic pass catching ability from the slot, from inline, from out wide.
I love the Aaron Hernandez comp, and we want to clearly state this is an on-the-field comp, not an off-the-field comp. Brett Whitefield's not going there. This is an on-the-field Aaron Hernandez. And I think if you want to, NFL has a way of repeating itself, Brett, and a lot of people New England could also attack a free agent offensive lineman and have that sort of squared up. I think that would make a lot of sense. Adding more youth to this offensive line after they started 2 in the Super Bowl, 2 rookies in the Super Bowl, I think you need to add a little bit more veteran presence on the O-line, correct yourself in the free agent market. So maybe a little bit less pressure on New England to add O-line at the end of the first round. You can see a scenario now, Brett, where all of the mock drafts leading up to the NFL draft, New England's going to draft one of these wide receivers. Everybody's going to say, this guy's going to 31, this guy's going to 31, and then they're all going to be off the board. It's exactly what happened in the 2023 draft class, where Buffalo, people thought maybe they'd go wide receiver at the end of round 1. A couple older wide receivers, and Diggs, Davis getting deep in their contracts. A lot of people thought Buffalo would go wide receiver the end of the first round. All the wide receivers are off the board. 4 go off the board right before them, and they end up taking Dalton Kincaid at 27 overall, another move tight end. So I think Stowers in New England, that might even be a better landing spot than I'm suggesting than Denver, because there's even less target competition for him to overtake. And you've got the history of McDaniels with the tight end position. Love that landing spot. Let's keep this one going. We talked about Ty Simpson. Let's talk about Trinidad Chambliss. And you're not even going to give yours on this one, Brett, because I think you have different ideas. But Trinidad Chambliss, a very interesting scenario here where wanted to go back to Ole Miss, was denied a waiver by the NCAA. Another player that I think will take advantage of this really not deep and not that talented quarterback class. Certainly guys like Cole Payton, Nussmeier could be in this top 3 QB discussion. But I'll say all it takes is one team in the NFL to fall in love with a guy like Chambliss, and he goes a little higher than expected. Let's say 33 overall, New York Jets, Trinidad Chambliss ends up in New York. Another scenario where you'd like to see a bridge quarterback there, maybe a veteran runs the show, and we see Chambliss taking over towards the end of the season, or more likely in the 2027 season. Trinidad Chambliss, the New York Jets. Anything you want to add here, Brett?
Yeah, I'll throw one out.
Okay,
I
all
don't
right, go for it.
What I wrote on the sheet down, Well, the Jets, by the way, they do have 2 picks in the second round as well, 33 and 44. So I'd feel comfortable at 44 maybe. Another team I'll throw out, though. Let's do this. How about Cleveland at 39? I mean, Shedeur Sanders isn't stopping me from acquiring a quarterback. They're not going to be in on the Malik Willis sweepstakes, I don't think. There's talk Deshaun Watson comes back, but I'd feel a lot more comfortable if I added a guy like a Trinidad Chambliss to my QB room, and now I have a Gabriel, a Shedeur, a Chambliss to kind of sort it out. I feel like there's a wide range of outcomes there, and maybe with those 3 dart throws, we can figure something out.
Yeah, and I think all these landing spots also sort of make sense if these teams really value Garrett Nussmeier, who helped himself out at Mobile, and he's starting to steam up LSU quarterback. So let's keep this one going, though. Get off the quarterbacks. Let's talk about a wide receiver who was the best player on the field on the offensive side of the ball in Mobile, Malachi Fields, a truly massive wide receiver, like 6'4", 230 pounds, and can really, really move. Unbelievably athletic player for a player of his weight and height. Malachi Fields, for me, my dream landing spot for him, 37 overall to the New York Giants, immediately steps into the wide receiver 2 role. I'm fully expecting Wan'Dale Robinson to sign with someone else and get a really, really big contract. Malik Neighbors also starting out the season most likely on the PUP list. So Malachi Fields has an opportunity to be the number 1 target for the first month of the season and then operate as the number 2 target with Malik Neighbors coming back and dominating targets. But Fields in that number 2 role with his ability to get downfield, potentially a dynamite red zone target. You're talking about making the offensive ecosystem better for Jackson Dart. Let's get him this level of athlete on the outside, and let's see where we go with this. And you add in Theo Johnson, that's a pretty difficult room to defend, especially when you talk about in the red zone, Brett, with Malachi Fields, Malik Neighbors, and Theo Johnson.
I really like the fit, Theo. One of the things that I like to clarify with Fields, too, is like a lot of times we throw out the term really great athlete, super athlete. Sometimes that only translates in like the form of testing, where like I think Fields, from a functional standpoint, is one of the most functional athletes in the draft. Like when we were down in Mobile, just the plays, the synchronization between his mind and his body is really where athleticism shows up, right? The things he can do with his body on a whim, the late adjustments to footballs, it's just fantastic stuff. And so I think he's a great fit as a wide receiver too.
I loved your, and not to interrupt you, but last pod you talked about him. I love when you mentioned T. Higgins, when in like an ideal scenario, he becomes a T. Higgins type. You talk about Malik Neighbors as the Jamar Chase, Malachi Fields as the T. Higgins. Not bad stuff for your guy, Jackson Dart.
It's a great setup. Yeah. The other spot I'll throw out to you is 54 to Philadelphia. If they avoid the skilled player room in the first round, I think they got to hit it at some point. We know Howie Roseman is the most aggressive GM in the league when it comes to attacking needs. If they move on from AJ Brown, they're going to fix that problem in some way or another with a high draft pick, whether it's at 23 or 54, I don't know, but they will do it. Howie is not shy about that. They'll probably trade for 3 smaller level players as well. That's what they do. So 54 would be a great spot to kind of fill that AJ Brown role in Philly. I hate calling it a role. It's not really a role. AJ Brown's one of one, but
irreplaceable, but a different type role. A different type.
Yeah, a different type role. He would fill that void, I guess, in Philly as the big body X type receiver that can do a lot of different things than AJ Brown. But it would be a really fascinating option there. Obviously, might not necessarily turn into a wide receiver 1 for fantasy, but I think he could be a high end wide receiver 2 with Devontae Smith there.
Yeah, I love that one. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think he's going to be off the board though by then. Just a gut feel
Probably.
that he's going to go a little higher. Let's go a little rapid fire. 2 other wide receivers without really diving into it. I'm going to go wide receiver Germie Bernard, Alabama. I'm going to say 58 overall to San Francisco. You talked about how they need a wide receiver. I think Bernard there would be a really, really interesting one. There's been some people, not Brett Whitefield, out there making some Deebo Samuel comps with Germie Bernard and certain things that you can do with him on an NFL field. And I think him ending up in a Kyle Shanahan offense would be fantastic. Where would you like to see Bernard end up?
I'll go Bernard to let's do Chicago replacing DJ Moore.
I love that one. I'll go also Chris Brazzell, who's a polarizing prospect from the sense that people don't like players out of Tennessee. 6'5", very, very fast. Played at Tulane before Tennessee. Brett's talked about him on multiple podcasts. Make sure you check that our previous couple shows, and we'll also talk about Brazzell when we're ranking the wide receivers in the upcoming weeks. But Brazzell, I think, is going to end up inside of round 2, and I'm going to steal your Atlanta landing spot. You talked about Omar Cooper at 48 overall. I'm going to go Chris Brazzell at 48 overall. And Brett, how about you retain Kyle Pitts and you go with Drake London, Chris Brazzell, and Kyle Pitts, so all 6'5" and taller guys.
City over there.
Nothing wrong with that. I think Penix could do pretty well. And you got Bijan Robinson underneath in that scenario. That's a hard team to defend. Yeah. For those 2 guys, where would you like to see him end up?
Well, I said Bernard to where'd I say him? Chicago. For Brazzell, let me go Denver at 62. The heir apparent to the Cortland Sutton, big X receiver there.
Very simple game. Very, very simple game. Let's go running back, and we're going to attempt to resuscitate the dynasty values of these running backs. Dealer's choice here, Brett. I got 4 guys listed. Who do you want to start out with? And you give your landing spot.
Okay, I'll go. Let me go Emmett Johnson.
Okay.
I want Emmett Johnson in Chicago at 89. I want the home run hitter to go with Monungai long term. Swift had a great season, no doubt about that. But I want to see Monungai has kind of established himself as a thumper. Give me some explosive run ability here with Emmett Johnson now.
And I went with another a sort of a free agent landing spot here where Travis Etienne leaves Jacksonville and Emmett Johnson goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars at pick number 100. So I'll have Emmett Johnson, I'll have Bashal Tutin, and I'll have LaQuint Allen, and I'm going to sort of have a quasi-committee with Johnson and Tutin battling out to see who leads it in terms of the most touches. You talk about a franchise that really valued explosiveness. Jacksonville showed it last year with Tutin. I think they could do back-to-back years here with Johnson, and his ability to catch the football out of the backfield, a better prospect, more well-rounded than LaQuint Allen. I think he could end up being a really, really fun fantasy asset in the Liam Cohen backfield. I'll go next because you said Chicago. I'm going to say Nick Singleton from Penn State ends up at pick number 89 to Chicago. Kyle Monungai there, but potential that they could move off of DeAndre Swift and save a bunch of money. Nick Singleton, incredibly productive throughout his career at Penn State, lost a little bit of oomph. The community's down on him right now, but you're talking about a player who's been a very successful pass catcher, ton of rushing yardage production, ton of touchdown scores in the Big Ten, and he has the ability to catch the football at the NFL level. Put Nick Singleton in a Ben Johnson offense at pick number 89, and I think the dynasty community would get pretty excited about him once again.
All right, can I throw another one?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to touch Singleton. I'll touch Mike Washington. You ready for this? I'm going to have a little fun here because this is a podcast and this is what we're allowed to have fun, right? In this alternative world, Detroit is moving on from David Montgomery, and they're going to draft Mike Washington at pick 118, and he's your new David Montgomery.
And that's a great comp for him. David Montgomery for Mike Washington. Love that one. I'm going to go even more oomph because you're like, all these people are like, hey, man, that's cool, but, that Jahmyr Gibbs guy is still going to be dominating the touches there. Give me something better, Brett. And I'll say the Mike Washington hive is buzzing. I've got Cody Carpentier coming on Dynasty Life this week. I know he's extremely high on him. I know you're really high on Washington. Washington had a huge Senior Bowl. Make sure you check out the show we did with Alex Dunlap. We talked about him a little bit. But I'll say even higher. I think Mike Washington's going higher. 65 overall to the Arizona Cardinals. Get an opportunity for him to step on the field. You look at the draft capital they spent on Benson 2 drafts ago. You'd have 2 third-round guys running that backfield. James Conner, let's see how healthy he is coming back this year. Big injury to Conner this past season. And
Benson, obviously.
And Benson. Benson can't stand an NFL field. Mike Washington has that dog in him. David Montgomery type NFL player. 65 overall. Goes higher than the market anticipates. Another landing spot that I think the market would like. And I think he's headed towards day 2, Brett. We'll keep talking about this throughout the next couple months and weeks. But I think Mike Washington headed day 2. Last back, Kaytron Allen. You talked about a back landing with the team and operating as the number 2. Let's go 80 overall to the Baltimore Ravens. You go with 1 year behind Derrick Henry, and then the next year Kaytron Allen can lead the backfield. Derrick Henry doesn't have to go away in 2027. They can still use Derrick Henry as like a goal line guy. You could still see a scenario where the touches go down. The efficiency is still there. Maybe that's his swan song season. But Kaytron Allen is an absolute bull, a player that was incredibly productive. The leading all-time rusher at Penn State, Kaytron Allen, goes 80 overall to the Baltimore Ravens.
I like that. I like him going to the division rivals at 85, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, that's a great one.
They don't have any long-term plays at running back. Obviously, our guy Kenneth Gainwell had a good season. He's a free agent though. Jalen Warren, I mean, they got to move on at some point, and then the rookie they drafted
Caleb
last
Johnson,
year,
and we'll say that like Caleb Johnson, I've seen a lot of people saying Caleb Johnson bounce back year. This new coaching staff has no alignment to him. There's nothing for Mike, unless Mike McCarthy is a huge believer. These sort of guys can get phased out. If you can't get on an NFL field as a rookie, the next coaching staff is not there to rescue you. It happens sometimes, but it doesn't always happen.
Right. Exactly my thought process.
Love it. This was a lot of fun. Anybody who we missed, put it in the comments. We'll try to talk about them in the next couple of weeks on the podcast. And hopefully we get these ones right, because I think the fantasy community would like a lot of them. Stick with us here, 2026 NFL Draft Podcast. Brett Whitefield and I, every single week, breaking it down, getting you ready to crush the entire offseason and to learn about this awesome NFL draft class that's upcoming. We'll see you very soon.